share my screen with you. And you should be able to see my PowerPoint. I'm going to get rid of my picture too and pin that to the top. So this is all sort of looking at nutrition as well. So the 6 tastes obviously come under nutrition. And I like to start off with the big picture why we're doing this. Why are we spending so much time looking at foods, looking at lifestyle? Why are we looking at specific things? Why even come on this call? And I often say that I came across this phrase that said, those who do not have time for their health today will soon have to find time for their sickness or disease later. And many of us, in fact, have lived that, or we know somebody who has. So what we're all doing is we're on that journey to preventative health. And part of that is these calls every month where we talk about different aspects. And tonight we're going to talk about the 6 tastes and why they are important. And this is all part of Ayurveda, where we use food as medicine. And just to refresh, in case you've forgotten, Ayurveda is just a Sanskrit term that means the science of life or the science of longevity. So because we spend so much time talking about nutrition, people often mistakenly think that's all it's about, food. And in fact, people often refer to me as their nutritionist or their dietitian. I've been called all kinds of things. But just to remind you, there are 3 legs under that stool of Ayurveda. So one is nutrition, and that clearly is really important. But when we look at nutrition, it's not just something we ingest through our mouths. It's something that we take in through all of our senses. So what we see is nutrition, what we hear, what we taste, but also what we smell and what we touch. All these things nourish our bodies, which is why it's really important to pay attention to what we're listening to what we're watching. For example, if we're just watching violent movies before we go to bed at night, we will often have disturbed sleep. So it's really important that we nourish all our senses. And I don't want us to forget the other 2 legs of the stool, because we talk so much about nutrition, and one of those is lifestyle. And that's what we do on a daily basis. It's what we do on a seasonal basis. Many of us right now are seasonally cleansing. And that's because it's one of those seasonal routines that we do that keep us balanced, keep us on track throughout the whole year. And then herbs, using food as medicine is another huge part of what we do. And we're really sort of looking more at food as medicine when we're talking about the 6 tastes. So before we get into the 6 tastes, let's just refresh. We've already gone through this slide in a previous call, but let's just refresh the difference between conventional nutrition and Ayurveda nutrition. And when we ask the question, why do we eat? Well, in conventional nutrition, we say, well, it's because of food preference. We eat because we like certain foods. I like chocolate cake, so I'm going to eat chocolate cake. We eat because of habit. You know, it's 12 o'clock, it's time to eat lunch. Social eating, all our social events tend to center around food. We celebrate with food, we commiserate with food, we have barbecues, we celebrate birthdays, all those major things around those sort of life changes we do around eating. We also eat because of physical appearance, or we don't eat because of physical appearance. You know, we won't have that good looking dessert because we're worried we're going to put on a few pounds. And we emotionally eat too. So when we're depressed, when we're stressed, when we need grounding, when we're depleted, we will often get cravings to eat. But in Ayurveda, we say, you know, the real reason to eat is to take in life force. So we're taking in that life force from the food into us, which is why it's so important to have fresh, wholesome food. And then when we look at the focus of nutrition, in conventional nutrition or Western nutrition, we say, well, the focus of nutrition is really about calories and counting them. How many calories does this food have? And then we make a choice, normally based on weight, as to whether we're going to have that food or not. But in Ayurveda, we say, you know, we're not really interested in counting calories. That's for the birds. What we're interested in is, are we able to process the food really well that we eat? Are we able to assimilate the nutrition from it? Because that's really important, because it's the food that nourishes all our tissues. So we need to have good nourishment. And then we look at the balance of nutrition. And in Western nutrition, we say, well, that's easy. It's those 5 food groups. I'm supposed to have so many carbs, so many fats, so many servings of fruits and vegetables. And in Ayurveda, we say, yeah, you know, that's for the birds too. Who cares about fat grams and how many pieces of vegetables or fruit you have? No, we just want to balance the 6 tastes. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, balancing those 6 tastes. And then the goal of nutrition, what is that goal? Well, in Western nutrition, we say, you are what you eat. And that does kind of make sense. We are, to a large extent, what we eat. But in Ayurveda, we say, you know, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. It's not just what you eat. Yeah, sure, that's important. Excuse me. But you are what you digest too. So you could have the best food in the world that's organic, that's right for your metabolic type, that's in season. But if you can't assimilate the nutrition from it, if you can't access that nutrition, then it doesn't matter how good your food is. So every time I start speaking, my voice stops going. So excuse me while I slurp on my chai. So let's look at the 6 tastes then. So while we should eat foods that balance our qualities, that balance ourselves, balance our metabolic types, we also need to eat the foods or variety of tastes into every meal. Now, there are 6 tastes in Ayurveda, and I want you to think of them as umbrellas over the food. And each one of these tastes has its own elements and qualities, and they have their own qualities too. And we're going to get into those qualities as well. So if we omit a taste, or we don't tend to eat a certain taste, or we overindulge in any one of the tastes, then there will be an imbalance due to we've either got too much of an element or too little of an element. Now, that certain tastes are more balancing for vata, pitta, and kapha, and we'll get to that in a minute. But Ayurveda says that we should have all 6 tastes in each meal for proper digestion and to satisfy the mind. So I don't want us to think about we ingest food because it's for our bodies. It's for our minds too. There's a lot that goes on in grounding and calming that central nervous system through food. So when we use all those 6 tastes, when we actually ingest all those 6 tastes, then our tissues will be built, they'll be toned, they'll be perfectly nourished. It's going to keep our agni, or our digestive fire, strong. It's going to keep our mind calm and sharp too. So it seems a little tough, doesn't it, to incorporate every taste into each meal? I mean, that can seem a little daunting. But if you think about it, if you have a plate of vegetables, a plate of fruits and carbs and some protein and some spices, then it's really easy to incorporate all the 6 tastes. So why these 6 tastes? What do they actually do? Why do we spend so much time talking about them? Well, balancing the 6 tastes reduces cravings, first and foremost. It also helps us to maintain ideal weight, whether we're looking for weight gain or whether we're looking for weight loss. Now, our Western diet generally consists of which taste? When you look at these tastes, if I was to tell you, well, give me something that's sweet, you'd probably be able to do that really easily. If I was to say, give me something that's sour, that's probably pretty easy too. And salty, that's pretty easy. And that's because the sweet, sour, and salty tastes are the tastes most prevalent in our Western world. It's in all our processed foods, and that's what we have the most of. But when I start talking about, okay, give me examples of bitter, not what you can see on this slide, but something besides dandelion leaves or turmeric, then you're going to perhaps be hard pressed to think, okay, what exactly is bitter? What other foods are bitter? And if I was to say astringent, besides pomegranate and parsley there, what else is astringent? And you might find that more difficult, as well as pungent. And that's because the bitter, pungent, and astringent taste we see much less in our Western diet, yet they are as important too. So it's easy to miss out in our Western diet on those pungent, bitter, and astringent tastes. And this is one of the causes of overeating or emotional eating for so many people. We have cravings for certain foods because our body's actually looking for the tastes that will balance it. And if we don't have enough of the bitter, astringent, or pungent taste, we're just going to have cravings for food while the body tries to find it some way. So each taste does have a specific action on the body and the mind too. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. So we want that variety of all 6 tastes so that it balances us out really well. So let's look at those tastes. So that first taste then that we want to look at is the sweet taste. So the sweet taste balances vata and pitta, and that's why they should have it in the diet. So when I say the sweet taste, I don't necessarily mean, well, we should all start eating chocolate chip cookies, but what the sweet taste is, it grounds vatas and pittas. But it does, however, increase kapha. So it's not one of the best tastes for kapha. So the sweet taste, it's not limited to just sugar, but it includes all complex carbohydrates, milk, sweet fruits, roots, root vegetables, oils, nuts, honey, and even meat the body sees as sweet. Now, refined or lab-made sugars are false tastes, and therefore they're not any good, because what they're going to do is they're going to interfere with normal metabolic pathways. Your body doesn't know what to do with fake sugar. So that's going to imbalance it pretty quickly. So what does the sweet taste do? Well, the sweet taste is heavy, it's oily, and it's cooling. So what it does is it's the wholesome builder for the body. It builds the body. It gives structure, it grounds, it gives nourishment, and it rejuvenates. That's what that sweet taste does. So if you find yourself craving something sweet, it's often because the body needs grounding, or the mind needs grounding, or it needs rejuvenating. We're just depleted. These sweet foods also build ojas, and we've talked about ojas. That's that sense of vitality, that sense of immunity and health and glowing that you can see in some people, and that's what the sweet taste does. So it creates health when it's used properly. So the sweet taste is the reason that the body grows. It also improves circulation. It relieves heartburn, so really good if you're suffering from that. It promotes stability in the body, and it in turn keeps the mind calm and happy too. And you know that. You have some chocolate and your mind just sort of calms. You just have that deep breath and think, oh, I feel so much better now. Now, what happens when we have too much sweet? So that piece of chocolate now becomes several bars of chocolate. Well, that over sweet taste will overbuild us too. So that's going to cause congestion, it's going to cause heaviness, laziness, obesity, and diabetes too. So it's going to create heaviness in the mind as well. And when we have that sense of heaviness in the mind, that's going to make us feel greedy. It's going to produce envy and possessiveness too. So too much sweet is going to make us feel possessive, envious of others, and feel greedy as well. So that's the sweet taste. Let's move on to the sour taste. Now, the sour taste is also balancing for vata. It's one of their tastes, but it increases pitta, and it also increases kapha. So let's think of examples of the sour taste. So that's unsweetened yogurt, citrus fruits. Most fresh fruit actually is sour, and juices. Alcohol is sour. Pickles are sour, that makes sense. Vinegary, fermented foods, sour cheeses, sour Patch Kids, Just seeing if you're paying attention here. Yeah. So the sour taste is heating, which is good in some ways because that heatedness will help stroke that agni, help build that digestive fire. So the sour taste improves appetite. It's an appetite inducer. It promotes heat internally, but it also promotes the cold feeling externally. It moistens tissues, which is good. So the sour taste is slightly oily. It's penetrating, which means it's sharp. It's a great laxative. The sour taste is also always laxative. It's great for constipation. It's great for gas and bloating, and also helps with vision too. So in balance, if you have a good amount of sour foods and you're in balance with sour, then just remember that the sour taste is heating. So it improves digestion, it reduces gas, it's going to increase circulation, liquefies mucus too. But if it's not expelled, it's going to clog the channel. So even though it's going to liquefy mucus, so if you have congestion in the lungs or congestion in the sinuses, it will liquefy that, but you've got to get rid of it, otherwise it will block up. Sharpens the senses. Often if you crave the sour taste, which sometimes we can, then that normally means we need to focus, we need to sharpen our senses, and that's why we're craving the sour taste. The sour taste is refreshing. It's used as a palate cleanser. So it stimulates our appetite and kindles that digestive fire. So if we have a sluggish digestion, then the sour taste is pretty good. But what happens then when we have too much of the sour taste? Well, then we're going to get heating problems like heartburn, acid reflux, ulcers. All this is because we've had too much of the sour taste. And then too much heat and acidity is going to result in burning sensations in the chest, inflamed skin problems like acne or eczema, blindness, itching, and herpes. These are all created because of too much of the sour taste. So let's move on to salty. And this is one of the tastes we're pretty used to. So the salty taste is also balancing for vata. So now we've picked the 3 best tastes for vata, which is sweet, sour, and salty. So they should have a lot of the sweet, sour, and salty tastes for them. However, that salty taste is going to increase pitta, and it's also going to increase kapha. Now, there's lots of different salts, isn't there? There's Himalayan sea salt. That's actually the best salt. And the Himalayan sea salt, or the pink salt, actually does not raise blood pressure, which other salts can do. Then there's table salt, which is really crappy. It's not very good for you. Rock salt, even kelp. All these are great sources of salt. Now, what salt does is it compels us to take in more nutrients by making food tastier. So it helps us utilize then what's just being taken on. Now, salt's heating. It also retains water. That's great for vatas who can dry out. Pittas don't need that extra heat, and kaphas certainly don't need the extra water. So salt's not a great taste for kaphas because it's going to make them retain fluids, and often they do that quite well without having salt. Now, the salt in balance. So if we're having a good amount of the salt taste, unfortunately in our Western world, we tend to overindulge in this taste because there's so much of it in every kind of food we have. It's hard to get away from salt. So in balance, what salt does is it increases digestion again. It increases that agni, that digestive fire. It increases tastiness, calms the nerves, brings a sense of confidence to people, and also relieves spasms or muscle cramps too. So the salt also breaks apart kapha. So we can often use salt like salt rubs or salts in poultices to break up kapha blocks if we need to. So then what happens when we have too much in the way of salt? This can cause us to overeat, because when food is really tasty and salt makes it tastier, then we're going to be tempted to keep going back for more when it tastes good. How many times have you got to a meal and you're stuffed, you're full, but you still keep eating because, gosh, it just tastes so good, doesn't it? So salt helps with that. Now, salt also creates soft and flabby tissues because of that water retention. Excess salt can cause problems like hypertension, ulcers, acid reflux, hair loss, gray hair, wrinkles, really obstinate skin rashes that you can't get rid of, thirst, and too much salt. What it does in the mind is it makes you egocentric. So you become very, very arrogant with too much salt in the mind. So who knew salt could do all that, huh? And then we have pungent taste. So the pungent taste is balancing for kaphas. This is one of their tastes. It increases vata, so not a great taste for vata. It increases pitta too, so they can't have a lot of it. So it's the taste that you might think of as spicy or hot. It's got a scraping action on the tissues, which is great for kapha's thick tissues. It adds heat, mobility, all the things that kapha needs. Pungent in small doses is okay for kaphas, okay for vatas rather. So even though vatas don't do well with a pungent taste, we should all have the 6 tastes. So even vatas should have a little bit of pungency. Because what it does for them is it promotes digestion. So the pungent taste actually helps with digestion. However, too much can aggravate or break down vata's delicate tissues as well. So they can't do too much of that pungent taste. Pungent should also be used pretty sparingly for pitta, since they tend to overheat, and this is a heating taste. And pittas don't need to be heated up any more than they already are. They have enough of that hot spiciness to their nature as it is. And if you're a pitta, you know this. So think of pungent as a dry heat. So this is great for kaphas, and that's exactly what kaphas need, because kaphas are cold and moist. They're clammy. So the dry heat of anything pungent really helps with kaphas. So when the pungent taste is in balance, when we have it in just the right amount, and most of us don't get very much of this pungent taste, it's really good for increasing our digestive fire overall. So if you have any kind of sluggish digestion, pungent taste is really good. And for the rest of us, it maintains that good digestion. So it's excellent for scraping, for burning away armor. Remember, armor are those digestive toxins that can build up. So we need that pungent taste to keep that in check. It reduces congestion, it improves circulation, relieves muscle tension, dries up mucus, promotes sweating, and it kills worms too, just in case that's your problem. So examples of pungent are ginger, that's the picture we've got up there, black pepper, chili flakes, chili peppers, horseradish, wasabi. These are all pungent foods. Now, what happens when we have too much of that pungent taste? Well, that's going to create more heating problems. So we're going to end up with things like dizziness, that internal burning sensation, a dry mouth, dry palate, dry lips, pain in the throat, heartburn, sort of burning urination too, not because it's a UTI, but just that pungency has created that heat. Ulcers too are often caused by too much of the pungent taste. Also, that pungent taste destroys strength and complexion. So think like dry red heat, like a chili powder. That's going to have too much of that pungent taste. So you can imagine how it's going to inflame the skin as well. And then our second to last taste actually is astringent. And this is normally where people say, you know, I'm not quite sure what is astringent. Blueberries are astringent. So it's a taste that's balancing for pitta, so it's definitely one of their tastes, and for kapha, but it's going to increase vata. We don't want to increase vata. So think of the astringent taste as cooling and drying at the same time. So it sucks out water, it constricts. So think about an unripe banana or a sour blueberry, and it sort of tightens up the mouth, doesn't it? It sort of dries out that mouth. So that's what the astringent taste does, is it dries us out. So let's think of some other astringent foods. So I said unripe bananas, pomegranates, chickpeas are astringent. In fact, most beans are astringent. Turmeric, very astringent. Spinach, chard, kale, some other leafy greens, the blueberries that we've talked about. Cranberries, they're astringent too, fresh cranberries. Aloe vera juice, that's astringent. Fenugreek, if you have that, like fenugreek tea. Green tea is also astringent, so is black tea. And honey has some astringency. Honey is actually quite drying, which is why honey is good for kaphas and not good for vatas. It's soothing, but it's also very drying. So great for clearing up congestion. If you have any kind of cough or cold or congestion or sinus congestion, honey is really good for that. So let's look at that astringent taste in terms of when we're balanced and when we're imbalanced. So balanced amount of astringency means it's going to be great for toning the tissues. So flabby tissues often means we're not getting enough of the astringent taste. It removes excess water. It stops bleeding, again, because of that astringency, because of that drying up. So great to put something astringent on a wound. It's antibacterial, dries up moisture, constricts vessels, purifies skin. It's constipating though, which is why it's not good for vatas, because they can be constipated enough. And it's really good for the skin as well. Now, too much of that astringent taste can be too drying and also too cooling. So it's very similar to the bitter taste in that it's going to cause depletion of the tissues. Another reason why it's not good for vatas, because they're pretty depleted themselves. It's going to constrict circulation. It also makes body parts quite rigid and stiff. Causes gas and bloating, another good reason that vatas don't do well with astringent taste. It can create pain in the heart as well, and also some vata disorders. So let's move on to the bitter taste. So this taste is really balancing for pittas and for kaphas too. But however, it's going to increase vata. So the bitter taste is cold, it's airy, it's subtle. It's going to reach the tissues fast because it's really light and fast and subtle. Bitter promotes the flavor of other tastes too. So it's kind of like a palate cleanser, as it wipes out the other tastes away completely. And if you have something that, if you were to eat something that was sweet and then have something that was bitter, you wouldn't be able to taste the sweet anymore. So examples of bitter: coffees, black teas are also bitter, green leafy vegetables, bitter chocolate, neem, which is a bitter Ayurveda herb. These are all sort of examples of that bitter taste. So let's look at bitter imbalance. If you have enough of that taste, then what the bitter taste does is it purifies the blood. It detoxifies the body, and that's why we have the bitter taste in the spring cleanse. And that's one of the reasons that if you think about the spring foods that are just coming into season right now, it's these bitter greens. It's dandelion greens, the spring spinach, the berries that are slightly bitter. These are all detoxifying foods which lighten and brighten us up after the heaviness of winter. So that's what the bitter taste does. It detoxifies. It also reduces fever, so it keeps our temperature down. It tones our body temperature or regulates our body temperature. It's a liver tonic, another good reason to use the bitter taste in the cleanse. And it reduces cholesterol too. So if high cholesterol is one of your problems, just have a look and see, are you getting enough of that bitter taste? And most of us are not. This is not one of the tastes we like. Caffeine is bitter. It's got that bitter aftertaste. So we like sweet, sour, and salty. We don't tend to crave bitter, whereas other countries, other cultures, they actually eat a lot of the bitter taste to detoxify, and they've sort of grown accustomed to it and like the taste of it. So it also reduces thirst, reduces any kind of dizziness and fainting, any skin disease or overhydration, any burning sensations, and any sort of blood disorders. It really helps with as well. So when we have too much of that bitter taste, though, it can be really drying. So it can deplete bodily tissue. So we have to be careful there, including fat, muscle, bone marrow, and reproductive fluids. The bitter taste can cause headaches. If it's too much, we're talking about now. Stiffness of the shoulders, exhaustion, pain, tremors, and fainting, thirst, loss of strength, and loss of reproductive ability. So if somebody has infertility problems, we will often see, you know, perhaps they're having too much of that bitter taste. The bitter taste also acts like a refrigerant too. So it can't hold any heat. And what that can do in the mind then is it can cause that sense of emotional coldness or emotional bitterness where somebody's just aloof, there's just no warmth to them emotionally. So I don't want you sort of discouraged by what your dosha can or cannot eat. Just know that we all need all these tastes, but we need them in different amounts. So vatas need sweet, sour, and salty tastes. Pittas need sweet, astringent, and bitter tastes predominantly. And kaphas will need pungent, astringent, and bitter tastes. So a vata person, or if you have a lot of vata in you, you're going to be balanced by the sweet, salty, and sour foods. And that's because these tastes will provide groundedness. They're going to provide moisture and oiliness and warming. And that's going to counterbalance Vata's airy, dry, and chilly nature. The sweet taste also builds, it secures, and it stabilizes Vata both in the body and the mind too. It provides a sense of oiliness that vatas need to balance their dryness because they're often too dry and they need that oiliness. The sour taste for vatas is going to provide heat. It produces liquidity. The salty foods provide heat and water, which is going to increase the digestive fire for them. And it's going to overall sort of warm up vata's chilly body or cold hands and feet that they often tend to have. And the salt is also going to stabilize vata's anxiety or that anxious nature. And it does this by building confidence and stability in the nervous system. So that's why sweet, sour, and salty are the best taste for vata. So let's look at pitta. Best taste for pitta is sweet, astringent, and bitter. So a pitta person is going to be balanced by those tastes. So let's have a look why. So first off, the sweet taste is a good builder for pitta. Since they have strong agni, they have a strong digestive fire, they tend to burn through their food really quickly. So they need a good base or they're going to get hungry soon after they've just eaten. So they're going to benefit from healthy carbs and proteins, while astringent and bitter foods, what they're going to do is they're going to bring a certain sense of coolness to their bodies. They're going to tone the tissues and they're going to prevent pitta from gaining excess weight. And often pitta will gain weight if they don't have enough of that sweet, astringent, and bitter taste. So pittas can often overeat when they're stressed out. So having that astringent or having bitter vegetables, fruits, and green teas is going to cool that fire element that they have in their mind. And that way they can focus and calm down. If they can do that, then they won't use food. And their food for calming the mind down is normally chocolate pastries or big sandwiches. They won't use that kind of food to de-stress. If pittas have only astringent and bitter foods and they don't indulge in the sweet taste, then they're going to get acid reflux, they're going to get burning in the esophagus because that nurturing, stabilizing, grounding quality of the sweet taste is missing. So it is important to have all of those tastes. And then let's look at kapha. So kapha needs to have pungent, astringent, and bitter taste, and they're going to be balanced by those foods. So kaphas are heavy, wet, sticky, and cold by nature. So these tastes are opposite. What they do is they promote lightness, dryness, and warmth. So kaphas can shed excess tissue by lightening up, by heating up, and by remaining fluid, which is what these tastes do. Now, kaphas are the most mentally sound. They're the most sturdy in physical build, so they don't need a lot of stabilizing qualities in their food. If kaphas eat heavy and sticky foods like peanut butter, oatmeal, macaroni and cheese, then they're going to immediately feel sluggishness in their digestive system. Conversely, if they were to eat astringent and bitter taste, then that's going to lighten and tone kapha, and it's going to keep their body and their mind awake. It's going to keep them really clear too. So having gone through sort of what's best for each dosha, let's look at the effect of these tastes on the mind, because there is an effect. So if we look at the taste in the column on the left-hand side, I've put the Sanskrit term too, but don't pay attention to that if you don't want to. So the sweet taste, or madhura, if you have just the right amount, it creates compassion and a sense of satisfaction in the mind. And we know that sweet taste is very grounding, makes us feel very satisfied. But too much of that sweet taste, and we're going to get attachment and possessiveness. Now, we're not used to thinking of tastes having an effect on our mind, but in Ayurveda, we recognize there is no difference, that what happens in the mind manifests in the body, and everything starts in the mind too. So in which case, nutrition, what we take in through our five senses, will have an effect on our mind too. Let's look at the sour taste. Well, the sour taste stimulates us and allows us to discern what's important, allows us to focus on what's important. But too much of that sour taste, and we're going to have envy, jealousy, and anger. Let's look at the salty taste. So that salty taste gives us that zest for life, confidence, ability to sort of feel great in what we're doing. Too much of that salty taste, and then we have greed and over-ambition. And what I think is really interesting is we have an overabundance of which three tastes in our culture? Yep, that was that sweet, sour, and salty taste. Well, look at the effect of overindulgence with those three tastes. And just make a note if you see a lot of that in our culture. I do, and maybe I'm the only one that's making that correlation. But just see what you think. Now let's look at the other three tastes. So the pungent taste causes us to be extroverted, a little bold, able to get out there and do things. Too much of that pungent taste and we get anger, violence, and hatred. The astringent taste, kashaya, the astringent taste, actually causes us to be introverted. And we often think of that quality of being introverted as a negative quality. But it actually isn't. We sometimes need to go internally to look into ourselves, to really understand what's going on. So it's actually not a bad thing to be able to have that quality. But too much of that astringent taste, and we'll see fear and insecurity too. And then that last taste, bitter, it creates in our mind dissatisfaction and isolation. And again, we tend to think of those as negative qualities. But think about dissatisfaction. There is no change if we are not first off dissatisfied with something. So sometimes we need to be dissatisfied because we don't want that status quo anymore. We do need to make changes. And then the effect of too much of that bitter taste is grief and sorrow too. So we've looked at food as medicine, and that's where we're looking at the 6 tastes, and we can use each one of those tastes in sort of more therapeutically, not just in terms of, oh, I like the sweet taste, but I don't like the bitter taste. Recognizing that each meal should have all of those 6 tastes. And it's pretty easy to get those 6 tastes by the time you put a meal together, especially if you get used to having things like chutneys. So I've just come back from India, and while I was there, it was really interesting. Every single meal I had, there were like 5 or 6 different chutneys, from mango chutney to ginger chutney. So you had the pungency in ginger chutney, you had the sweetness in mango chutney. So it was very easy to just take a little spoonful of these chutneys and say, hey, I got my taste in for this meal. It was a very easy way of doing it. But if you're not into chutneys or don't want to make them, although they're very easy to make, and you know, every now and then I'll put them in my recipe meal plans. You think about it, you can sort of make up, let's say you want to make up a minestrone soup, you can put a little bit of ginger in it. You can have all those 6 tastes in a soup. So that's pretty much it there. Any questions now? I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint and come back to you all. And do feel free to unmute if you would like to ask me a question at all about anything to do with the 6 tastes.
Hey, Carrie, it's Tracy. How are you?
Hi, Tracy. I seem to see you about over the 6 tastes constantly.
So how do we know that we're getting enough of the 6 tastes? Is it truly just a taste, or, you know, I work hard at getting those 6 tastes in at every meal, and I guess in terms of, you know, from a cooking perspective, I'm pretty diligent about, you know, following through on things, but I just want to make sure, is it truly just a little smidgen, if you would?
That's a great question, Tracy. So first off, look at your dosha and what are the best tastes for you. All right. So let's say your vata and your best tastes are sweet, sour, and salty. So you know predominantly those tastes are what's going to ground you, keep your digestive running well, keep you lubricated and feel really good. But you also need those other tastes too. So for you, if you were a vata, then you would have smidgings of those other tastes. So you throw on maybe a few bitter greens in your soup, you know, maybe a little bit of ginger for some pungency, but you wouldn't necessarily have ginger tea all day, every day because of its pungency.
Okay. That makes sense. I just wasn't sure how much to focus on that little bit, because I would throw the arugula in, something to get my bitter in, or, you know.
It's a great way to get something bitter in. Yeah, arugula is great. Great question. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Are you back from Hawaii, by the way?
Still in Hawaii. No, still.
You're still there? Oh, shame.
Yeah, it's 1:45 p.m. So.
Nice. That would be really nice right now. Anybody else have any questions about the 6 tastes, how they affect our minds, how they affect our bodies, how we can ingest those 6 tastes and get them in? Anybody not quite sure what they should be doing as far as the tastes? It's a different way of thinking, isn't it? We're not used to thinking of eating foods with those tastes and having those tastes have an effect on us. Silence was the stern reply. I see all these people on the call and nobody's asking me a question except Tracy.
Hey, Carrie, it's Anita.
Hi there. How are you, love?
I'm tired. I just got back from my weekend in Atlanta. I had a good time, but now I'm noticing I'm a little sluggish, and my hands and my feet are swollen.
Well, did you just come off a flight?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's why. So just for everybody else, Anita, do you have a lot of kapha in you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So kaphas will retain fluid when they're under stress. And if you've been in Atlanta, have you been eating a lot in sort of hotels or airline food and things like that?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's normal, love. Don't take it personally. That's normal.
Okay.
So think about the taste that we've got in those foods. So salt is going to be one of the biggest tastes that you've been ingesting recently. And remember what salt's going to do with kaphas, it's going to create water retention because salt has an affinity for water.
Right.
So you're going to blow up because of So my suggestion to you is, you remember that Ayurveda super tea? that you have.
Yes.
Go and drink that. That's going to help detoxify that excess salt and the excess water through you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I would spend the next couple of days drinking that tea a lot, and that'll get rid of the salt for you.
Awesome. I did just, I made a pot of, I had the cannellini beans, the onions, garlic, and kale with some olive oil. I made a soup. So I've been sipping on that and chewing since you told me digestion starts in your mouth. So, okay, super tea and soup. Hopefully I'll find some relief.
And that's great. When you think about the taste of your, so the cannellini beans are bitter and astringent, the kale's bitter, the ginger's pungent. What else did you say you threw in there?
Garlic and onion.
Pungent, yep. So you've got some great taste in there that's going to counteract some of that increased salt that you've had and from flying.
Oh, I didn't even know that. I was just craving it and I couldn't understand it. So, okay, I'm listening to my body.
Trust your body. Sometimes it knows before we do. Often it tells us, we just don't listen to it. Yeah.
I'm listening.
We don't listen. We're ignorant in that way. Yeah. But yeah, that's a great soup for you, Anita.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Then what I'm going to do is, this is recorded, so I will render the recording and I will send it out tomorrow morning to everybody, so you'll have a recording of it too. So I want you to have it for your records as well. If there's no last minute questions, I'm going to sign off. And don't forget, the 28th of every month is when we do these calls. I love it. It's much more fun if there's somebody at the other end of this call, so that's great. And I have forgotten right now what we're doing next month. I know, it was really interesting. No, I can't remember offhand, but I'll send, when I send out the recording, I'll tell you what's coming up for next month too. So thanks for being on the call. I appreciate it. Take care. I'll be talking to most of you within the next couple of weeks. Remember, it's springtime, spring cleansing, bitter foods, bitter vegetables, a soup just like Anita made sounds great. Get a lot of those 6 tastes in each meal. And any questions, you know I'm here for you. So take care. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.